السلام عليكم. اللهم انفعنا بما علمتنا وعلمنا ما ينفعنا. This is another episode of Iqra from the Crescent Center. The khutbah that I gave this last week about at-taqleed, blind imitation, um, was somewhat received with, I guess, more enthusiasm from the youth because they felt that they can relate to it. And a few people came up to me and asked me about the issue of copying one's parents and so on. And this is something that is important because it is practical in our lives and how you deal with accepting our, qiyam, our values from our deen. And I think that's what's making our center more relevant. Um, the khutab that we should have in all our masajid should be about how to um, understand religion in two prisms, one in relation to the akhirah, which is very important, and also how it relates to our lives. And I think the fact that in the center, at the Crescent Center, we try to have khutab that address both issues um, is filling a void, I would say, and I hope that it is, because when we talk about these subjects, and maybe it is important to clarify some of these concepts that I talked about, um, it really makes our deen more relevant because, quite frankly, and this is what I've been saying in these small lectures, is that this deen has to be a part of our lives. And that's why Allah says in Surah Al-Baqarah, إذا قيل لهم اتبعوا ما أنزلنا اتبعوا ما أنزل الله قالوا بل نتبع ما ألفينا عليه آباءنا. When Allah says follow what we have given you in the Quran, they say we will follow what our parents, and here parents doesn't mean necessarily just our immediate parents, but our grandparents and our tradition and our culture. Allah says أولو كان آباؤهم لا يعقلون شيئا ولا يهتدون. They will follow their parents even if their parents do not think and they have no guidance. And in Surah Al-Ma'idah, Allah says أولو كان آباؤهم لا يعلمون شيئا ولا يهتدون. Even when their parents, they will follow their parents and their customs and traditions, even when their parents have no knowledge, علم ولا يهتدون, and no guidance. So in Al-Baqarah, Allah says لا يعقلون شيئا, they do not think, and in Al-Ma'idah says لا يعلمون شيئا, they do not have any knowledge, because knowledge and thinking are connected. You have to have thinking to have knowledge. So they have لا عقل لهم ولا علم لهم. They have no knowledge and they have no brains, or they have no thinking. And the answer that most of people that follow their cultures blindly is that they always say إنا وجدنا آباءنا على أمة وإنا على آثارهم مقتدون. We found our parents على أمة, which means doing things a certain way, and we are gonna follow it the way that they used to do it. Now, it's very important to clarify that we need a certain level of copying or imitation in our lives, because it would be impossible to go on with life always starting from the point of zero. You always have to have something to build on, because if you don't have something to build on, you're always going to be sort of reinventing the wheel, as we say. The idea here is that you look and you evaluate things, and you say, this is good and I need to build on it, or this is actually not good and I need to invent something better, or I need to improve it. You try to sometimes, adjust to certain realities. And that is very important because in life, we have two philosophies. We have the philosophy of being, and we have the philosophy of action. The philosophy of being, or what we call al-kaynuna, which is just existence, it's really based on the thinking that there is no need to think in life. You just basically follow what has been given to you. And there's an assumption that everything is there for you to use. On the other hand, there is the philosophy of action, which relies on you invent knowledge and you create knowledge based on experiments, discovery, trial and error, and things that science is based on. Now, التقليد, which is blind imitation, tends to be more with the philosophy of being. And the philosophy of action is more in line with اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق, which is the first ayah in our Quran, which is knowledge. Now, اقرأ in Arabic means read, but it doesn't only mean read, it means seek knowledge. خلق الإنسان من علق اقرأ وربك الأكرم الذي علم بالقلم. So you seek knowledge because you're seeking ilm, you're seeking improvement to one's life. And that's also in line with what Allah said in Surah Al-Baqarah, إني جاعل في الأرض خليفة, because that is really kind of, when you look at the big picture, you always have to go back to this ayah. Allah says, إني جاعل في الأرض خليفة. You have to try to kind of, always measure things, in relation to this ayah, because that is what Allah wanted. Because we miss the ayah that says that al-malaika, and this is why it's important that we, try to kind of like think about how this is, different from when Allah says, gives us orders about salah and so on, is that we always have to compare ourselves, to beings that Allah had asked to only do tasbih and taqdees. In the Quran, Allah says, "Al-malaika yusabbihuna lahu fi al-layli wan-nahar wa hum la yas'amun." So they do tasbih day and night, and ولا يسأمون, they do not get bored, they do not give up on doing that. But even with that, and even when they protested, or I shouldn't say protested, but made the remark that أتجعل فيها من يفسد فيها ويسفك الدماء ونحن نسبح بحمدك ونقدس لك, Allah told them, the Malaika said, you're gonna make a Khalifa who is gonna be brutal and gonna be doing killing while we are here doing tasbih and taqdees. Allah says, إني أعلم ما لا تعلمون, I know what you don't know. So clearly Allah was not looking for us to just do that tasbih and the rituals, even though that is part of our ibadah and taqarrub lillah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the primary ibadah is really, as I said before, is really outside the masjid, how you deal with people, what you give to this life and to this society. And that's why I really believe that we are, inshallah, finding that we are getting traction or getting a connection with our youth a little bit more. We have a couple of events like a girls' night for teenage girls, where you see an average of 25, 30 girls that come to the center, and it's kind of trying to mix, social events with, our deen, and try to basically make our deen part of life without, that sort of stiffness. So I think that the fact that I discussed in the khutbah, for example, قول الإمام علي Sayyidina Ali said, ربوا أولادكم لزمان غير زمانكم. Teach your kids as if you're teaching them for a time that is different than your time. And that is really perfect attitude in how we should present our religion. It does not mean that you try to teach them something you don't know, but you teach them with the knowledge that not everything that you went through and your parents went through has to be copied by them. In fact, that is counterproductive, because if just imagine if everything that you do is the same like what your grandfather did. My grandfather and great grandfather, they lived at a time when they had no electricity, and they had they used to get water out of the well. So what does that mean? It means that their knowledge was obviously similar to what people in their time knew, but we built on that knowledge. And that's why it's important that we don't look back at them and say, oh, they had no knowledge, but they obviously had less knowledge. Now, they may have had better life, quality of life, maybe yes, maybe no, but that's not the point. The point is that we build on discoveries. Joseph Henrich wrote a book called The Secret of Our Success, and basically it talks about civilization does better when people take what works and they add to it. He in fact discussed not experiments but facts where people in Latin America, for example, preserve their meat in a certain way, this way because they don't have or at some point they did not have a way to store their meat in the proper way, so they found certain preservatives and putting more salt, and that's kind of like a discovery that is okay at their time. Now obviously we have refrigerators and we can store it in a better way. Now this might sound a little bit oversimplifying things, but that also applies to how we deal with a salaf. Now the salaf were an ummah that gave us a lot, that sacrificed a lot, that fought for the sake of Islam. But they had if you look back at history, they were normal people. I mean, the Prophet ﷺ said, "Innama ana basharun mithlukum." So imagine if this is who is the uswa says that he is regular people. So Salaf is regular people. They had their own shortfalls, and they had their own mistakes. I mean, you have to remember, somebody ended up fighting against Sayyidina Ali. Somebody ended up killing Sayyidina Uthman. We're not here to blame this or that, but we're here to say that mistakes happen in every generation. There are good people in every generation, but we look at the people that were our Salaf and how they were so caring about Islam. Now we take also what the A'imma had provided in terms of scholarly knowledge, and we say, okay, that's great. Now let's build on it, and we look at the say 8th century or 9th century up to the 12th century when knowledge was basically on the rise in the Muslim world, and we say that is great. Let's now think about things, and add to it. There are things that would be impossible to go back to, because knowledge, there's tarakum, there's building. There was a time when people thought that the earth was flat, and there was a time when Ibn Khordova came and said no, it's not flat. And he's a Muslim scholar. He was in the 13th century, and he said no, actually it's not flat. And people started building on that, and then later on Copernicus came and added to it, and slowly people started understanding how the earth is not flat. And with this knowledge, now we can understand some ayat more than we could have done at the time of al-Imma. Allah says in one ayah, وَرَبُّ الْمَشَارِقِ وَالْمَغَارِبِ, right? And then there's another ayah, رَبُّ الْمَشْرِقَيْنِ وَالْمَغْرِبَيْنِ. And there's an ayah, al-Mashriqi wal-Maghrib. One is Mashriq, one is Mashriqain, one is Mashariq. Now, once you understand that the earth is not flat, then now all of a sudden you can understand how there is Mashariq and Magharib. If the earth was flat, then it would be only one Mashriq and one Maghrib, and we never would have understood how al-Mashariq wal-Magharib comes into play, or the Mashriqaini and Maghribain. The Mashariq means the multiple Mashariq where the sun rises, and multiple Magharib where the sun goes down. What I'm trying to say is that knowledge is based on accumulation of information and facts, and that is something that correlates positively with discoveries and with science. And that's why when we look at the Salaf, we say قدس الله ثراهم, بارك الله فيهم, جزاهم الله خير. We appreciate what they've done, but do not discount, scholars that today can give you an insight into our deen, and they can relate it to life and say, oh no, we just want to copy, that group. Why? Two reasons. One, blind copying is uqum. Uqum means it does not give birth to anything new. Okay, you just keep on going back. Okay, and it's also tashwih, distortion of the facts of what the past was. Because when you try to copy somebody, 10 years ago, you're probably not going to be able to do a good job. So imagine when you're copying somebody 1500 years or 1400 years ago or 1200 years ago. It's almost like you're doing a Xerox copy. The first copy might come back, come out a little bit, more fade than the first one. And then after 6 or 7 copies, you probably can barely see it. And that's why there's the kid that asked, the father that asked his son, he said, who do you want to be like? And the kid said, I want to be like you, father. And the father said, بِئْسَ الرَّجُلُ أَنْتَ. He said, you're not going to be a good man, because I wanted to be a copy of the Imam Ali, and look at me. You're never going to be a copy of another person. Now, people will probably now here say, wait, we try to, لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةً حَسَنَةً. Now, two things we have to say here. We only have one uswa, and that is the Rasul alayhi salam. So there's no need to copy other people. And here we should stop and say, when Allah says لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةً, He's talking about Rasulullah, meaning the Rasul with his risala, the messenger with his message. Okay, لمن كان يرجو الله واليوم الآخر وذكر الله كثيرا. So about his positions, about what he did, about what he believed, and about what about his da'wah, and about his conduct, and about his tasamuh, and about his caring about the deen. He was not talking about the way the Prophet looks. He wasn't talking about the way that, if the Prophet was using the suwak until this day, we have to use this. You can use the suwak if you want to, but this is really not part of religion. That's what I'm trying to say. There are discoveries that we need not reinvent the wheel. We have to build on it. And that's part of, and the most important part of what I'm saying is not the negative aspect of not trying to copy Salaf, because we try to give names to blind imitation as, ittiba' Salaf. There's no thing as ittiba' Salaf, okay? There is taking the good things that they've given us and build on it. That's what you need to do, because that we are the deen of Iqra. And Iqra is about you building and giving to this world because you are Khalifa. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم. نسأل الله أن يعلمنا ما ينفعنا وينفعنا بما علمنا. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله.